Cloud computing. No, it's nothing to do with the weather. It's a new way of delivering software applications and processing data via the internet, and it's taken the business world, well, by storm. Cloud computing refers to services and applications that are hosted on and accessed through the internet, or the cloud as it's known. You see, how it works at the moment is most software is bought by the IT department, installed on servers at the company's own offices or data centres, and then it's integrated with other software and managed by the in-house IT team. So it goes without saying this can be an expensive and pretty complicated process, and projects often run for months or sometimes even years. The idea behind cloud computing is that instead of doing it themselves, companies can rent an application or service from a cloud computing provider. The customer might not have a clue what kind of hardware is running on, what country that hardware is even in, or where their data is being stored and processed. All they care about is access to the service. Although variations on these services have been around for a while, developments in broadband speeds and software engineering have reached a point that means these services are reliable, secure, and at a cost that makes them increasingly attractive to business and home users. So much for the high concept stuff. If you're going to make cloud computing work for your organisation, there are a number of issues you have to think about. After all, if you're going to rely on the cloud to store data vital to your business, such as sensitive customer information, then you really need to think carefully about making sure you're getting the most out of cloud computing, while still protecting your digital assets. It's really easy to sign up for cloud computing services. All you need is a credit card and you can be up and running in minutes. That's great, but it's also a problem because any end user could be using services not authorised by the business, sending confidential data into the cloud without their bosses or IT knowing about it. Companies need to know what cloud services are being used by their staff and work out whether the usage is in line with company policy. Act quickly to shut down the use of cloud services that could threaten data security or otherwise damage the business. Educate your staff so they understand the implications of using cloud services, but also be on the lookout for clever ideas that staff have come up with for using cloud services and be willing to use these more widely. Just because the application isn't run by your tech team, that doesn't mean you aren't responsible for it. Make sure your provider has the same level of security as you would have on site. Your users and your customers will blame you and not your service provider if anything goes wrong. Make sure you have contracts in place which detail the service levels which you will accept, and what happens if those service levels aren't met. Different service levels may be acceptable for different types of application. Make sure you talk to end users to find out which services need to be always available and those that are less core to the business. And make sure you understand the cost structure. Some cloud services are free, like a consumer webmail service, but some are expensive. The benefit can be that you don't have to buy the hardware up front, but be aware of the ongoing subscription costs and how they will fit with your budget. Cloud services rely on an internet connection to deliver services. What happens if the internet isn't there? Make sure you update your disaster recovery plan to include cloud services, including having a backup plan in case your broadband service is knocked out. And make sure your cloud supplier also has a disaster recovery plan in place that covers these issues. More broadly, make sure you have a plan in place in case the supply goes bust. Make sure you'll be able to recover your data. Likewise, make sure you have processes in place to enable you to move to another supplier or bring the application back in-house again should you need to. Many of these issues relate to all suppliers, whether their software is delivered through the cloud or not. But data security is a particular issue with cloud computing because you could be sending your company's most vital asset, its company data, to be stored off-premises. As a result, you need to make sure that any supplier treats that data with the same care that you would, and as such, you will probably want to insist that your supplier encrypts any customer data that it holds. Depending on where your business operates or is headquartered, there may be data protection legislation to take into account, which may mean that your cloud provider would have to make sure your data is only being stored in a particular region, such as keeping it in Europe, for example. Your rivals may well be using the same services, so you'll want to make sure your supplier can keep your data separate. Find out what safeguards your supplier is putting in place in case things go wrong. For example, how, when and where it backs up its data and systems. And then start over again. Just because you've been through a checklist once and everything made sense, don't leave it at that. The needs of the business will change all the time, so make sure your policies towards cloud computing can change to match them. But for those companies that seize the opportunity, this cloud could be one with a very shiny silver lining indeed.